So welcome everyone. Welcome to this side event on inclusive infrastructure, disability and climate change. What's needed to leave no one behind. Hosted by the Global Disability Innovation Hub alongside the World Blind Union, UN Ops and important. My name is Shivani Gupta and I work as Senior Inclusive Design Manager at the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and I would be the moderator. I would like to begin by inviting Michaela Patrick, who is head for Inclusive Design and Climate at the GDI Hub. And Michaela is leading research and delivery work at the GDI Hub. Themes of inclusive design, climate, and crisis resilience. Michaela is a research lead on the UK-aided funded 2030 program, sub-program on inclusive infrastructure building evidence on the state of inclusion in 6 cities in low and middle-income countries. And Michaela is a trained architect and inclusive designer. Michaela is going to be sharing her welcome address, and so over to you.
Could we move to the next slide, please? And the next one. So, hello everyone, my name is Michaela Patrick and I am Head of Inclusive Infrastructure and Climate at the Global Disability Innovation Hub. Just before I get started, I want to share just a quick notice that our sign language interpreter is running a little bit late as they had trouble to access the venue. So hopefully they will be here shortly, and I do apologize for that. So in our session today, we're going to start with me giving a bit of an introduction to why we're all here, a little bit of introduction to our work at the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and just why we want to be here connecting with partners and stakeholders in the room today. And then after that, I will move on to introduce back to Shivani for our panel discussion. And then we'll also have a reflection after the panel discussion. And I just want to share as well for everyone in the room that we're going to have about an hour's session today. And then we have some time, 20, 30 minutes at the end for networking and discussion in the room. So please do stay and have a chat after the session has formally concluded. So could I move to the next slide, please? So here we have all of our speakers who are joining us today. So there's myself. We have Hannes Julien Lagrulias from World Blind Union. We'll have Seema Rakwad from UNOPS joining us online. Luisa Miranda Morel from C40 also joining us online. And then we'll have Fatma Al-Jassim giving a reflection at the end of the session. But before that, after my welcome, we'll also have a few words from Michael Kharad, who is the UNDP Goodwill Ambassador. Next slide, please. And here I am. So just to get started, before I launch into my slides, I wanted to do some thanks. So firstly, I wanted to say thank you to our funder who has enabled us to be here today, which is our UK aid funding under the 80-20-30 programme. So under this programme, we're doing lots of work in the space of disability innovation, which you're going to hear more about shortly. Also, just a short thank you to all of the GDI Hub colleagues who helped make this event happen, as well as the programming and events team here at COP and at Dubai Expo City, who've been phenomenal in supporting us throughout the preparations for this event. And then lastly, thanks to all of you for being here. It's so great to have you here in the room, and we're really grateful for you spending your time with us today during a session that is, super important in terms of advancing disability inclusion in cities in the context of a changing climate. But also we know that it's a packed agenda at COP. There's so much going on, so we're really grateful for your time. So why are we here today? Next slide, please. So at GDI Hub, we've been working in the space of climate for a couple of years now. But what we wanted to do today was have this event with our invited speakers to start to talk about more partnerships and collaborations that we can have for inclusive infrastructure. So I'm going to share a little bit about our work and what we're doing, and we hope to connect with you all throughout this session to talk about collaboration. And now we have our sign language interpreter here with us. Next slide. So GDI Hub is a research and practice centre driving disability innovation for a fairer world. We're based in London in the UK at University College London. And our legacy is that we were founded in the legacy of the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. So that was a really important moment in the UK for disability innovation and inclusive design. And we really wanted to take what we learned there and continue that legacy and innovation and creativity and share it with the world. And that's why we're here now as GDI Hub. Next slide, please. So one of our thematic areas is inclusive design. So London 2012 and the Olympic site was really a space in London that was made to be as inclusive as possible during the Games and also in the legacy after the Games. We now take our work on inclusive design in cities around the world, and we're looking to also work in the space of climate and crisis to look at the intersection of inclusive cities and climate change. Next slide. No, it's fine. So we formally launched our inclusive design strategy, which is a strategy to support cities in delivering on inclusive design at the World Urban Forum in June 2022. I'll be sharing a QR code where you can access this resource later. Next slide. So why climate change and inclusive infrastructure? We believe that to meet our goals in inclusive cities, we have to adapt to the changing environment around us. We know that disasters have greater impact on persons with disabilities and are actually set to worsen accessibility in cities. So it's so important that we think about inclusion now. The global momentum that I think is there, and we're seeing this week at COP, to transform cities and infrastructure for a more resilient future, is also an opportunity to really embed inclusion and make sure that we do things right for the first time and make sure that we leave no one behind. We also see that the way we use resources is changing, including things like assistive technology. And we need to make sure that these essential, vital technologies and products that we need for everybody to be able to participate in society are, supporting a more inclusive and just transition. Next slide, please. So we first started talking about climate change at COP26 in Glasgow, where we held a side event on cities and infrastructure, looking at how we can embed disability inclusion in those conversations. So that was 2 years ago. Then we gathered some stakeholders. We spoke a lot about the challenges, but what we knew then, and I think we still know now, is that what we really need is evidence and action. We need to know what we need to do and how we need to do it. So we hope that this event today and the resources you're going to hear that our speakers will be sharing are going to be part of the package, let's say, of what we should be doing so we can all take actions forward from this. Next slide. So at GDI Hub, we have a few different projects that are looking at the intersection of disability inclusion and climate resilience. One of these is a project we're working on with climate investment funds and CBM Global, where we're looking at knowledge sharing and generation to embed disability inclusion in climate change financing. This is a new project which is going to be sort of coming out into the public more next year. So I would say keep an eye out for this one. There's going to be different resources around certain thematic areas such as disabilities, just transition, climate smart cities, and nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. One early session we did on that I just wanted to briefly share was that we held a workshop on a disability inclusive just transition in Indonesia just a couple of weeks ago, which you can see here on the screen. There's an image of all of our participants in a meeting room in Jakarta discussing a disability inclusive just transition. Next slide, please. Now to our major programme of work, which is the UK aid funded 80-20-30 programme. Now, this is a huge £20 million programme, which is looking at testing what works to improve access to life-changing assistive technology for all. Next slide, please. As I said, it's a huge programme working in over 35 countries. We've reached 29 million people so far. We're working across assistive technology, innovation, inclusive education, inclusive infrastructure, and climate resilience. Today, I'm going to focus on the work on inclusive infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the reason that we're looking at inclusive infrastructure within this programme, within the 80-20-30 programme, is because we know that access to assistive technology requires an accessible and inclusive environment around us. If we don't have an inclusive environment and accessible infrastructure, we're not able to use the AT that we have in the way that we would like to. Next slide, please. So this has been a 4-year programme working in 6 cities around the world with over 200 participants, including 107 persons with disabilities. So the cities that we've been working in are Surakarta in Indonesia, Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, Varanasi in India, Nairobi in Kenya, Freetown in Sierra Leone, and Medellin in Colombia. So on screen, you can just see a map of the different countries and cities that we've been working in with the logos of the local organizations that we work with. And I should just emphasize here that each city case study is done with local partners, with local organizations of persons with disabilities to ensure that the research is disability inclusive and reflects the local context and local perspectives. Next slide, please. So a few sort of really short starters of things that we found in that program of research that have meant we've turned our attention to climate resilient infrastructure. Firstly, I think we all believe, and I hope that this is echoed within the room, that inclusive is resilient. We can't have resilience and sustainability without inclusion as part of that picture. They need to go hand in hand, and we need to have the tools and resources to allow us to work with these ideas hand to hand. Secondly, we need accessible infrastructure, and we need to make things better, not worse. And this is something that I see happening with the great shifts and plans we have in development and construction to support our changing climate. We need to make sure that all of that new infrastructure is also accessible and inclusive for everybody. There needs to be inclusion of persons with disabilities, following the mantra of nothing about us without us. Every project that is about inclusion should be including the voices of people with disabilities. And to support that, we really then need integrated policies and inclusive approaches. So making sure that policies at an urban and city level that we have around climate goals, targets, are also thinking about the inclusion picture within that. Next slide, please. So one of the other things that I think we need to do, and we need more evidence for, which is something that we are doing at the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and we are looking to do more of, is understand the diverse impacts of climate change on persons with disabilities. So understanding how issues such as increasing and extreme heat, flooding, unequal energy access, health risks around climate change, food security, and the impact of poverty and living in informal settlements have on the ability of someone to participate in society and live and have equal rights with everyone else. We also want to recognise the opportunities for inclusive design. So within all of these topics that I'm mentioning very briefly now, there's, oh, that's my timer. I'm nearly done. Within all of these different topics that I've mentioned, we can use tools like inclusive design standards, inclusive design strategies and approaches to ensure that we do include persons with disabilities in these projects that we're planning and delivering, to make sure that they end up being as accessible and inclusive as possible. Next slide, please. So the 6 case studies I mentioned on these 6 cities are available now online. They've all been published, and there's a little QR code here with the link to them, but this will also be available at the end of the session. Then early next year, we're excited to say that we will be publishing a global comparison report that will be looking at the global state of inclusive infrastructure, drawing on the research from these 6 cities. And to accompany that, we will have a global action report that will look at recommendations and actions for cities to embed disability inclusion and inclusive design in their planning and development. Then moving onwards to 2024, which brings us here today, we will also be developing a new program of work looking at inclusive and climate resilient infrastructure. So this is work that is still in the planning stages, but we've got funding under the UK aid-funded 80-20-30 programme in its next phase to do some work on inclusive and climate resilient infrastructure. So that's why we're here today, to celebrate that and also meet everyone who's here in the room and have these important conversations about disability inclusion in the context of climate change and infrastructure in cities. So with that, I'll pass back to Shivani.
Thank you, Michaela. And we're going to have a little, a little talk by Michael Habib before we go on with our session, because he needs to get back to media work, I guess. So, yeah, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Haddad. I just came from a walk that I don't know, you heard about it like 10 minutes ago, to raise awareness on the importance of the impact of climate change on people with disabilities, or how they call it here, people with determination. I don't want to take a lot of time. Thank you for amending the schedule. I'm still wearing my exoskeleton. That's why I couldn't stay a lot. I have to take it off so that I could relax. Definitely, we all know that climate change is affecting all of us. It's the #1 killer in the world, but it's not affecting all of us equally. There is a category of people that is being affected more than others when it comes to climate. We at the UN call it the most vulnerable community. And people with disabilities are on the top of this category. And the thing is, climate change is affecting us directly and indirectly. And the science behind it, it's still shy. And till this moment, we are not under the direct radar when it comes to the decision making. We are there, but the approach is still shy. So my message is very simple. We have to start talking. We have to start talking loud. And we have to unite together to put this topic under the radar of the decision makers, especially when it comes to climate, and to focus on 3 things. 1, to be existent strongly in the planning and decision-making process. 2, in the programs and projects. And 3, in the funding. Today is an iconic day. For the first time ever, we have a fund that directly mitigates funding for climate actions, especially in needed countries. I think the best outcome today, especially now that we are here, is to voice out a very strong and loud tone, voice, positive, because positive impact is better than negative impact always. It works better to be existent in that approach. I come from a country of war. I come on a country that lacks basic accessibilities. I represent a region that suffers, but I'm a person who also believes that nothing is impossible. If we could do baby steps, we could walk, and I think we could teach other people how to walk, because we walk it here and here. Thank you so much. I'm Michael Haddad, and I'm looking forward for our coordinator. So you have my contact, Michaela, right? So I'm very sorry I have to leave because I'm still wearing a very bulky exoskeleton. I walked in the sun. I carried myself around 1,000 times, which is 110 kilos. But please reach out and please give everybody my contact. And we're looking forward to connect together. Thank you so much.
We'll have Michael's details on screen at the end of the session with all the other participating speakers.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Let's just take a moment now to get some chairs up. Michaela? So let's begin the panel discussion. And first, I'd like to invite Hannes to share his presentation. Hannes is a self-advocate based at the World Blind Union and has been active in the disability rights movement and development arena for over 12 years. He spearheads the World Blind Union Global Program for Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development. He has worked as a part of Sweden's bilateral development cooperation, promoting disability rights, and held numerous CSO board sessions. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Ivani. Thank you so much, Michaela, and many thanks for the opportunity to be part of the very exciting event today hosted by the DDI Hub. So we are very grateful on behalf of the World Blind Union. And also, of course, to our funders who enable our participation as a global organization of persons with disabilities, namely the Swiss Development Corporation. We can go for next slide, please. Well, we could. Oh, now we are. Okay, great. I mean, I coordinate our work around inclusive and accessible urban development, but I just quickly want to set the scene for some of our key messages around the theme for today's discussion. Because undoubtedly, urbanization is one of the most important trends of the century. Together, we see a very, very urgent climate crisis. And from our, we always refer to some key data points. And one of them is that already today, more than half of the world's population live in cities. 16% of us, including myself, who identify as a person with disability, we live in cities. And already today, more than half of the population of persons with disabilities in cities, and also older persons, face challenges to access transport, digital infrastructure, and we face a lack of access to adequate housing, health, employment, and education. Recognizing this, in about 2 decades, 70% of the world's population will live in cities and communities, including over 2 billion persons with disabilities and older persons. We should note, however, that 60% of the settlements we need in the coming decades remains to be built. This poses both huge risks, but also, if we are keeping doing business as usual, but also pose enormous opportunities to practice what we preach in terms of inclusion, equality, and human rights. It's critical for urbanization plans and policies to respond to the rights and needs of all persons with disabilities in all our diversity, in order to address risks, prevent rising inequalities, and ensure that obligations by the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities are met, but also towards fulfilling the promises of the 2030 Agenda, the New Urban Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. The New Urban Agenda truly supports the realization and localization of the CRPD, development, and other humanitarian agendas across all levels. The participation and engagement of the organized constituency of persons with disabilities is paramount to progress. And because without the participation of persons with disabilities, cities and local governments risk adopting strategies, policies, and programs that may reinforce accessibility barriers and create new ones, instead of bridging divides and counteract marginalization. Globally, the World Blind Union has taken leadership to change this and ensure that we have a say in the decisions that impact our lives and our community. Since the adoption of the new urban agenda, the World Blind Union, together with other organizations, persons with disabilities, other partners and allies, has been in the forefront of advocacy efforts to ensure that accessible cities for all truly becomes a reality. We are supporting our membership and other constituencies of persons with disabilities to truly be at the decision-making table towards implementing the new urban agenda in a way where disability inclusion, accessibility, and universal design are truly integral. We have invested a lot of resources into trying to support increasing the participation of persons with disabilities, including our own constituency, in global discussion relating to sustainable urbanization, because we truly have to be at the table. We develop and roll out key resources together with our partners to support advocacy and the provision of technical expertise to mainstream development stakeholders, as well as partnering in multi-stakeholder partnerships with organizations including UN Habitat and the United Cities and local government. Towards building cities for all, green design must go hand in hand with inclusive design approaches, ensuring that we remove barriers, not building new ones, as I talked before. And this certainly, from our perspective, this cuts across both adaptation and mitigation efforts. During the years, we have collected a few key learnings I'd like to highlight for the course of the discussion today. The first one being that localization is key to address accessibility barriers and combat the global accessibility crisis. Because cities are growing, but so are the barriers we experience as persons with disabilities. The COVID-19 pandemic reminded us that much has to be done to really fight the systemic discrimination we see in our society today. And for effective localization, policies and standards must be harmonized and aligned in compliance with the CRPD, including Article 9, which truly goes into detail what accessibility is. Because usually what is understood as accessibility is different, but we always refer back to the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This includes accessibility standards, while also placing accessibility at the heart of national and local action for urban progress. Moving forward, we need to address the gap in disability data, but also trying to work together with local and regional governments to capture data not only disaggregated by disability, but also we use different tools and platforms to get data about the barriers the constituency of persons with disability are facing, to be able to inform policymaking in making the right choices, which responds to our rights and needs of our constituents. The second point and the second key learning is that meaningful engagement and participation of persons with disabilities is paramount towards shaping inclusive climate action while building inclusive urban resilience. As Michaela mentioned before, this goes in hand, right? And this is truly at the heart of the programming of the World Blind Union, because sustainability requires inclusion, and inclusion requires meaningful participation. Cities have not considered human, like when many cities around the world were built, they did not consider human diversity. And persons with disabilities today are rarely engaged or having a seat at the table in urban planning and development discussion. Being at the table, however, is not enough, but we all have to be part of the kitchen crew. We need to co-create and co-cook the solutions so that solutions to address the challenges of urbanization are truly responding to our requirements and needs. Local and regional governments are key stakeholders to really put disability rights into practice. They must work with the organized constituency of persons with disabilities, and in the same way, and create avenues for that. But the organizations of persons with disabilities also actively have to try to work together with the local municipalities. This is key to identify barriers and solutions to really move forward, ensuring that investments are truly reflecting our requirements. Last but not least, oh, actually I have 4 points, is the importance of multi-stakeholder partnership. This was already elaborated on before, that organizations of persons with disabilities, together with national and local and sub-national governments, together with academia, the private sector, we all have a role to play to co-create the solutions we want to find, we want to deploy in our cities. At the global level, the WB is working has been working, as I mentioned before, with the UN Habitat, with the United States local governments, which I will come back to in a little bit. So co-creation of tools, I stressed. I'd like to go to the next slide because I know I'm running a bit late. So sorry for jumping a bit. So before this session, we were tasked to share a few key publications or tools or practices, also to feed into our discussion coming up. The first one, and I'm showing a few QR codes on the slide, but it will also be shown a bit later. The first one is a very unique policy brief we developed earlier this year on localization to solve the accessibility crisis, which we developed together with the United States and local governments, which is the global, I would say, the global federation of municipalities with over 300,000 municipalities and members. But we were also supported by the UN Habitat and the International Disability Alliance. With the policy brief, in short, really takes, it really zooms in on what is localization and what is accessibility, because many times they are not seen as convergent. And we advocate for the fact that localization is really a vehicle to ensure that what is done in urban areas truly integrates accessibility in line with global development frameworks and legal obligations of UN member states. The second one is a global survey on accessibility and the engagement of persons with disabilities. Because as I mentioned before, we know the overall state of accessibility around the globe, but we need to know how it actually looks at municipal and local government levels. So currently there is a survey out for local and regional governments on how they are addressing accessibility, but also how they are working together with organizations, persons with disabilities, including around climate action, but mostly focusing on accessibility, right? We are very happy that we have a few of the partners working around us with this initiative today, and we do hope to have a final report for that at the World Urban Forum 12 in Cairo next year. We will also do a similar survey to the organized constituencies of persons with disabilities globally, because we believe we also need to raise our voices in the same discussion. Last but not least is and that's actually the last thing on my slide here, is a publication called the Accessibility Go, a guide to action, where we have, together with some of our key partners, really tried to go in depth on how organizations of any type, including municipalities, UN bodies, UN entities, etc., can embed accessibility. Because we can talk about inclusive programs, we ensure accessibility in program implementation, etc., but really the impact of inclusive programming will be determined about how an organization operates. So this guide, which is a practical tool, is not a blueprint, provides a tool for self-reflection for any type of organization, to look into what works, what are the challenges, and what do we need to do to ensure that our operations, practices, systems actually are accessible. Because we believe that that will ultimately influence the extent to which an organization's program can be truly inclusive of persons with disabilities. And I'm very happy to take some time more later to elaborate more on this with you in the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Hannah, for sharing those resources and the key learning. Next, I'd like to invite Seema. And since 2005, Seema has been working in climate action advocacy and programming. Her early work was in Bangladesh, and it focused on supporting and development of climate vulnerability and capacity assessment, strengthening community-based adaptations to climate change, and development of organizations' strategic plan on climate change. Seema has authored several publications on climate change, and more recently, Inclusive Infrastructure for Climate Action, published by UN OP in 2020. So Seema is joining us virtually.
Thank you for the introduction, Shivani and Michaela, and thank you for inviting UNOPS to this forum as well. I think for us, what is more unique is our commitment to inclusive infrastructure. And I think today's discussion really brings us very close to our agenda: inclusive infrastructure, disability, and climate change. These are things that we've been working on for the past several years, and we bring to this forum not only examples, if time allows, on how this nexus really has worked for us, but also some of the resources that we are continuously developing, as well as, really looking at what is inclusive infrastructure and how does it really work for all of us. I think one of the things that UNOPS has been emphasizing is that to be truly inclusive, we would need to adopt an intersectional approach to our work, which basically means that while developing inclusive infrastructure, we involve identifying, understanding, and addressing the inequalities and the barriers, which include the physical barriers as well as the lack of safety, prohibitive costs and requirements, discrimination and social inclusion, which is also limited access to information, lack of access to decision making as well. These lights in this room are automatic, and so I'll have to keep clicking on them to work. For us, inclusive infrastructure really takes into account everybody's diverse needs and empowers all people, especially the most marginalized, and to have good quality life and be able to fully participate in the society and be more resilient to climate change impacts. In our more recent publications, we've actually highlighted 5 principles of inclusive infrastructure that not only address the systemic barriers of that women face, but also the systemic barriers that people with disabilities face and other marginalized groups face when it comes to climate action or comes to accessing essential services. And these principles are the basis on which we continuously work, which is that inclusive infrastructure needs to be equitable, it needs to be accessible, affordable, do no harm, and inclusive infrastructure needs to be empowering as well. And throughout this work that we are doing, we are also emphasizing on the need for multi-stakeholder dialogue, which needs to happen continuously and throughout the infrastructure life cycle. So whether it's the planning stages, the implementation stages, the delivery or the management, in all these, this multi-stakeholder dialogue needs to happen throughout. UNOPS also identifies 4 very clear priority action areas. And these are strengthening the enabling environment, which basically includes not only capacity building of infrastructure practitioners, but also it kind of emphasizes the need for a gender equality and social inclusion transformative approach to understanding and to addressing the diverse infrastructure needs of persons with disabilities, women and other marginalized groups. As we know from various studies and from various reality checks, that climate change exacerbates the vulnerability of these groups. This also includes making an active attempt to transform the harmful norms and practices which surround infrastructure. And this can be done by building gender equality and social inclusion awareness and sensitivity. It also involves reforming policies and legal frameworks, but also, I think, more holistically to use the human rights perspective. These lights are so painful. In addition to all this, I think the very need for the collection of disaggregated data through various participatory approaches are also the need of the hour. I think our previous speaker also emphasized the need for co-creation, prioritizing inclusive and needs-based solutions. And I think this is really very important. For example, we can learn from indigenous peoples and coastal communities regarding nature-based infrastructure solutions to managing natural resources and also mitigating the negative impacts of floods, droughts, sea level rise, etc. We also need to emphasize, and I think this is another area, an action area for UNOPS, is delivering inclusive solutions, but also delivering them well. This includes enabling the meaningful participation of persons with disabilities, women, marginalized groups across the life cycle of infrastructure development, as I have stated earlier. For example, and this can be done through creating diverse representation in infrastructure, planning, design, implementation, operations, management, and also employing a participatory and employment intensive approaches. But also I would say, adding to this layer, the need for safe, targeted financial investments. And I think those are extremely important as well. The need for emphasizing the maximizing existing system performances, the need to include cross-sectoral and systems perspective to inclusive infrastructure, the need to also have, like I mentioned earlier, adequate resourcing, funding, capacity for proper maintenance and operationalization of the inclusive features within the infrastructure assets, as well as facilities over the lifespan of the projects, but especially during and after climate change related disasters. I think the need, again, is really important for us to be able to not only collect, but also respond to feedback and respond to complaints, urgently and immediately. These are some of the action areas that we would like to continuously focus on. But I'll bring this back to you again, Michaela and Shivani. I'll take a stop over here and then come back to you with some of the different resources that we have developed and are continuously developing. So is that okay if I come back to you a little later on that? And also, I will be available to share examples from our projects in the field where the nexus of gender, disability, and climate compatible infrastructure has really shown that it can be done and will be done. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Ima. We haven't been able to share Seema's slide, but at the end, we will be sharing all the resources that UNO has. So now we go to the next speaker, Louisa. And Louisa's professional experience stems from her having worked in development, humanitarian, and now climate fields in a variety of urban and in urban areas in different countries. In her work, Louisa hopes to support local governments in building coalitions with civil society and other stakeholders to adapt to the increasing scale and frequency of climate change impact, while also ensuring that these actions pave the way towards a more sustainable and socially just. So, Lisa is joining us virtually.
Thank you, Shivani. I hope everyone can hear me. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting C40 to this important event. Thank you, Michaela and Shivani. Is it possible to have the next slide up on the screen?
So, Louisa, we don't have the slides going right now because,
Okay.
I mean, if we had the slides, we wouldn't have you on your screen, and it's much nicer to have you in front of us.
Yeah, my face is quite big on that screen. Okay, that's okay. Well, so first of all, I will speak a little bit about what C40 is. It's a network of mayors of nearly 100 world leading cities collaborating to achieve two main missions. The first is to help get the world off fossil fuels in order to halt climate breakdown. And the second mission is to address the impacts and injustices of climate breakdown. And we work with mayors because for us, what we see is that local governments are unrivaled partners in the delivery of climate action. And they represent the closest level of government to residents and are the first responders in emergencies and are delivering world-leading action that is showing what it looks like on the ground to deliver a transition that is just and equitable and fit for people and planet. However, that said, we do recognize that there is no climate justice without social justice. And so for us, supporting mayors and their teams to deliver inclusive climate action at the city level is critical to achieve both of these things. But city governments are not and cannot do this alone, as already has been mentioned in previous statements. We all have a role to play, and it's only together that we can really achieve this impactful action and ensure that that this action on the ground is really responding to the needs of residents, and that includes the needs of disabled people. So we are looking to support cities to engage more with disabled people and organizations as crucial active agents and allies in delivering the climate transition. At the moment, there's the slide on the virtual thing. So if we can go to the next slide on the virtual version. There we go. Okay. So just for those online, but hopefully I can try and depict what is on the slide. In the last year and a half, we've been working with city teams. So this means technical teams working on the climate policy design and delivery on the ground. We've been working with them to, first of all, provide direct technical and financial support for the delivery of disability inclusive programming. And this starts with the city of Vancouver and the city of Quezon City. We've also been engaging with a global network of these technical focal points and non-city experts as well, representatives of disability organizations from different regions, because also the regional perspective is very important to us. And so bringing these different actors together, we've been trying to engage in peer learning activities to identify who we can collaborate with to collectively support mayors and their city teams. And throughout this work, we've engaged these teams across different climate sectors as well, because when we talk about inclusive climate action and what that really looks like around disability inclusion, it can vary dramatically across different climate policy making sectors. And so what we've done is try to identify knowledge and capacity gaps and awareness gaps as well that have helped inform the development of a resource pack for cities. And so hopefully this resource pack will help city teams address the gaps that we've identified, but also effectively mainstream disability inclusion across different climate action sectors. So for now, if we go to the next slide on the screen, at least the computer screen, for now, the resource pack is made up of a fact sheet and 3 policy papers, and we chose to focus the 3 policy papers on areas that we feel are really relevant to existing climate action demands for on cities, but also sectors that are key to making a difference in terms of ensuring disabled people are not left behind. So the first one is disaster risk management. We know more frequent and extreme climate impacts are, a reality that we have to face now. And the more they will continue to act as fundamental obstacles and severely slow down the implementation of ambitious climate solutions, the more it's important for us to understand how to overcome these challenges, how to mitigate the impacts, and adapt to these changes. And within this context, people with disabilities experience disasters and the process of recovery in different ways. This obviously we have discussed, and it's already been mentioned. You know, it can depend a lot on existing financial resources, access to support networks, and the presence or otherwise of physical, attitudinal, institutional, communication-related barriers to inclusion. So our first policy paper really focuses on understanding these links and equipping city teams with recommendations on how to act on these links to develop not only life-saving disaster management strategies, but also seize the opportunity to recover and rebuild more resilient, inclusive, and thriving communities. The second paper that we're working on at the moment is focused on mobility because air pollution and the climate crisis go hand in hand, and people with disabilities are disproportionately affected by poor air quality, particularly through exposure when traveling around a city, for example. As it can compound existing issues such as respiratory or musculoskeletal conditions and worsen mental and cognitive disabilities. So expanding active and accessible transport options and ensuring policies such as low emission zones are considerate of disability needs is a significant part of the support that we want to give mayors to ensure that we're transitioning to a net zero carbon future that leaves no one behind. And one important thing to note within this context also is that within mobility action, there is a really important opportunity around good green jobs. And that delivering good green jobs is a huge objective for the mayors that we work with. And so mainstreaming disability inclusion through transport services and hiring practices in the planning and operation of transport services allows many more people to participate in formal and informal jobs and livelihoods. It can really kind of empower people economically and also really create systemic changes within the system to ensure more inclusive disability practices. Finally, the third paper focuses on the energy transition to net zero, along with measures to reduce energy demand and increase energy efficiency. And this is an area of action that is in grave demand. It's extremely challenging, and it involves the work of the energy, housing, building, health sectors, and many other sectors, because energy poverty is such a multidisciplinary, complex issue. And what we know from our conversations and our interviews with different experts and representatives of disability organizations is that people with disabilities can often have greater energy requirements than non-disabled populations. And for example, they can require above average electricity consumption for life-saving machinery, and that helps breathing and mobility or body temperature regulation. And this is all the more severe for people that are confined within their home for a longer period of time, and therefore require to heat or cool their homes for longer periods of time during the day, especially during moments of extreme temperature, which is what we're increasingly facing with heat waves, for example. And so this is how energy poverty really plays an important role in this conversation. Finally, to draw everything together, we have a fact sheet that tries to support city teams to develop a baseline understanding on what disability is and how to communicate about it, and why disability inclusion should be mainstream across climate action and air quality action. And this is really kind of also to support city teams, because we have noticed sometimes there is a lack of awareness, and we need to kind of raise awareness more broadly to ensure that city teams have the resources, the support, the data, as already has been said. And so that's what this fact sheet kind of tries to focus on. So these are all available, they're open, and they're mainly focused on supporting city technical teams, but hopefully they can also be a useful reference for partnerships and these kinds of dialogues. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So again, the QR codes to all the resources will be shared at the end of the session. So we are running a bit behind time. So what I'm going to do is ask one question to each of the panelists. And Hannes, my first question is to you. And I'd like to ask you, how do these resources support inclusive climate action?
Thank you so much, Shivani. I will try to be very brief, mindful of time. I think I shared a couple of resources, right? The localization brief to address the accessibility crisis, the ongoing survey for local and regional governments on accessibility and OPD engagement, and also the accessibility goal guide to action, right? Very quickly on the localization brief, I think everyone is talking about localization now. We have to find local solution, but also take the global development frameworks and human rights frameworks, put that into a local context, because that truly provides roadmap. The global development agendas are very much integral of climate action. And I think in the localization efforts, I mean, accessibility has to cut through. Just to take one example, because we provided a lot of recommendations to UN member states, is to ensure that when you're taking action locally, it could be around transport, it could be around mobility, it can be around climate adaptation and mitigation, for instance, to ensure that the avenues for that, and including public consultations, are actually accessible for persons with disabilities to be in those conversations. We see today that, and I think COP28 provides an example of that, that many times disability inclusion, the participation of persons with disabilities, is not considered. So we're not at the table. So it contains recommendations in relation to that as well. For the survey on accessibility, I think it actually relates to the point I just highlighted, because we need to understand how our cities and local governments truly addressing accessibility, not only across the built environment and the digital environment, but also in climate adaptation efforts towards building resilience. As was highlighted before, we cannot build resilience if we are not integrating accessibility. Because if we're not integrating accessibility and resilience measures, the resilience measures will not be inclusive of persons with disabilities or other social groups. So the survey really helps us to map that so that we, together with our key partners, can really tailor support, including learning and exchange of experiences between local and regional government and the disability constituency. I think for the accessibility goal, I mean, in many conversations I had throughout COP28, it's like, oh, how do you work on disability inclusion? And they were like, no, we don't really do that. We don't really know how to do that, because many times we know the why it's important, but not really the how aspect. And for us, before discussing programming, we need to also discuss organizational practice. So regardless if it's an organization, as I mentioned before, any type of organization, but now in particular for the context of this discussion today, are organizations who work for climate action, they also need to look inward to see, okay, but do we practice what we preach? Do we practice disability inclusion? What measures do we ensure that our product, services, systems are accessible? And one discussion the other day was about how do we ensure that climate information is actually accessible for persons from different constituencies, including persons with disabilities. And the accessibility goal is a great tool to help organizations chart the path to achieve that as an outcome. So I will end there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannes, for sharing that. And I'd go to the next speaker, and I'll ask Seema, what are the priority areas to address gaps in achieving inclusive infrastructure in climate response? That's the question to Seema.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think I alluded to my introduction. During my introduction, I actually alluded to some of those priority areas that we've identified, like strengthening the enabling environment, prioritizing inclusive and need-based solutions, delivering inclusive solutions, but delivering them well, and maximizing existing system performances. I think what I'd also like to share over here is the fact that while we are doing all this work, we are also backing this with a whole lot of guidelines, a whole lot of publications. And at this COP, I think in another 15 minutes or so, we will be launching one of our new publications, which is providing guidance to different practitioners and actors on how to mainstream inclusive approaches while developing transport, wash, energy, health, and education infrastructure. And this we are doing in partnerships with ILO, UN Women, ARUP, UNICEF, WaterAid, and IEA. And one of the first volumes, which is the guidelines for developing inclusive infrastructure, transport infrastructure, is being launched in a few minutes from now. But internally, how are we really looking at it? UNOPS is also working through mainstreaming gender equality and social inclusion with a focus on disability inclusion in all our projects. And to do that, we are guided by our gender equality and social inclusion strategy, which is a strategy for all projects within UNOPS, which is again accompanied by guidelines of how to the previous speaker mentioned the how to is really something that needs to be unraveled much more clearly and articulately in the projects. But we are also further guided on our disability inclusion work through our disability inclusion work plan, which is further guided by the UN disability inclusion strategy, and to which we report annually and are continuously improving our mainstreaming efforts on those indicators by engaging inclusion consultants and partnering with organizations working with people with disabilities. We are also developing and consolidating a suite of digital tools, and I'll be able to share a little bit more about them. One which is called Sustainable, which supports UNOPSs and its partners to plan, to deliver, and to manage sustainable, resilient, inclusive infrastructure. And the different tools within this suite are the access, how to access the infrastructure and enabling environment, how to identify suitable financing, the creation of an action plan to maximize sustainability impacts, and to explore data towards evidence-driven decision-making. And, on the 3rd of December, during the celebration of the International Persons with Disability Day, UNOPS hosted an event with 80 Scale. And Michaela, you were also part of that conversation. So in that conversation, we've kind of really emphasized the need for formulating partnerships, whether they are formal partnerships, whether they are informal partnerships. But these partnerships are really important to enrich and to lead the discourse on the nexus of inclusive infrastructure, disability, and climate action, and ensuring that no one is left behind. So with those words, I'd like to close now and then come back if there is more time with examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Seema, for sharing that information. And I'll go to Louisa now. And Louisa, question to you. How can partnerships be formed to ensure that no one is left behind?
Thank you. So what I wanted to add to the conversation is very much speaking from the interaction that we have with city teams and mayors specifically, and the types of partnerships that I think are important to highlight are obviously first partnerships between city teams and disability organizations, specifically because as we are observing that more and more city, like mayors and city teams are setting up more inclusive decision making mechanisms, such as advisory councils, working groups. And these are strategies that mayors are using to help deliver just transitions locally. within these advisory councils and within these decision-making mechanisms and structures, it's a key opportunity to strengthen the representation of disabled people's perspectives in decision-making and in budget allocation. So that's one type of sort of partnership where between city teams and representatives of disabled people can really be played out, really speak to the how, which was already being mentioned earlier. Another type of partnership, which, and the other thing is that, you know, we talk a lot about coalition building, because often mayors and city teams might not necessarily have all the resources or all the mandate to actually make substantial changes in certain areas. So when through coalitions and through partnerships, they can really pool resources and they can pool capacity and data to really help facilitate and accelerate climate action locally. And related to this, I think one important, as I mentioned already, there was the objective and the mandate and the purpose to deliver good green jobs in the transition is foundational. And so we are doing a lot of work to support mayors in building partnerships with unions. And I think already the International Trade Union Confederation the other day on International Day of Persons with Disabilities was really highlighting how unions can really represent specific needs and ensure that through, you know, they can leverage their relationships to support the rights of people with living with disabilities. So the partnership there with unions is foundational, and of course, workers who are disabled have to be at the forefront of those partnerships, of course. Finally, the last thing I will say, and it's more of it's a partnership, but it's more of a collaboration because it happens within cities. I think it was already mentioned that you know, it's so important to gather data, for example. That's a very practical example. But often what we observe is that within city teams, there is little sharing of data, or even within city teams and regional governments. So collaborations that cross silos and that cross departments and that cross vertical silos as well can really facilitate and unlock the access to data and the access to resources that can help deliver this type of important work. So those are the kind of three types of partnerships that I think are really foundational to leaving no one behind.
Thank you, Melissa. That's really very insightful. Well, I'd like to really thank all the panelists for sharing such great information. And in the end, I'd like to invite Fatima Al-Jassim, who is a disability inclusion and accessibility consultant, to share her reflections on why persons with disabilities must be included in
Hi, could I just get my mic? Hello. So, can everyone hear me really? Well, just while Fatma is coming onto stage, I just wanted to give an update as we're running a little bit over on our time. So we're going to have a reflection from Fatma now, and then I'll formally close the session with our online speakers. But we can continue the conversation in the room. So I hope maybe after that we can do questions from the room, have these conversations, with the refreshments at the back of the room, and we will make sure that we share all the resources to everyone who's attended today online. So if you want to hear more from us and you use that in particular, please do get in touch with us and we'll make sure that you either get that contact details or now over to Fatma.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Get the volume a bit louder for something.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Resilience, or to be resilient. What does truly take to be resilient? Resilience, or to be, as people with disabilities, we are constantly asked, or rather forced by the world around us, to be resilient, to face adversity with grace, to live with our hands tied to our chest, casting an armor shielding our dreams, our hopes, ourselves, our lives. I am honored to be part of this thought-provoking and insightful gathering today. And I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the team at the Global Disability Innovation Hub for giving me this opportunity to share with you my personal reflection after listening to all of the incredible speakers today. If you have not figured it out yet, I am currently nonverbal. And thanks to artificial intelligence and assistive technology, I can share with you my thoughts by using an instant clone of my voice. This demonstrates how assistive technology is intertwined in my life and in extension, our lives as disabled people. What is needed to leave no one behind? That's the big question that everyone in the disability sector asks themselves every single day. We know that data from the United Nations tells us that people with disabilities are 4 times more likely to die in climate disasters. We know that women and girls with disabilities experience a multifaceted barriers and further discrimination. We know that 1 in 5 people with disabilities struggle to evacuate in those natural disasters, and 80% of shelters are inaccessible. We know that it is no longer acceptable to ask why, and that we must invest in the how instead. To foster inclusive climate infrastructure, we need to move from responding to anticipating and leading the way forward. We need to move from a focus on surviving to thriving. We need to question our systems, solutions, and evaluate our collective efforts. My ask from all of you today is to commit to listening, to questioning, to not only co-creation, but also take up space and get louder together. Let us dismantle the armor. Let us redefine resilience. Let us thrive.
Thank you so much, Fatma. And those were incredible words to formally close the session. So I won't say too much, but really thank you for your contribution today. And just to say that from all of us at Global Disability Innovation Hub, access to and innovation into technology is at the heart of everything we do. So echo your words, how to transform our lives and make it better and for everybody. So to our online guests and our recording, I would now say we will close the session. Thank you for joining. For everyone in the room, please stay. We have the room for another 13 minutes. So there's a coffee and some food at the back, and please do continue the discussion. I'll formally close now, but if someone in the room would like to ask questions to the results of the page, please do go ahead now.
Hi, I want to ask that we are talking about climate change, but we don't consider the mental health of persons with disability when, for example, the housing blockade and the housing started. I think we should include a committee who will rescue persons with disability physically and give mental support. Do we have a plan? Because along with physical support, we also need our mental support. Because when we don't have food, our mental health, for example, disabled people, family, that lost their job, then they support, then they need mental support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment and question. Need another comment from you?
Thank you very much. I'm honored also to
Excuse me.
also thank the panel to begin. So my name is Joseph from Kenya. I also work with an organization by the name of the Disability Program of Saga. I've been able to hear what we talked about climate change and the impact it's having on persons with disability. And I'd like to think for my group who are deaf or hearing impaired. For example, currently experiencing floods in Kenya, but climate change, they really do not understand in terms of accessing the information, in terms of also emergency preparation, where to go, it becomes hard. For example, we have like where my organization works with persons who are HIV positive. When it is flooded, it becomes difficult for them to access health services. Therefore, I'd like to advocate for accessibility so that it becomes equal for everyone.
Thank you so much. And I think we had another.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Firdaus, and I have recently written an article based on mental health during the menstrual hygiene of girls with special needs. It's in Giving Now magazine of Bangladesh. It's published just 10 days back. And me in person, I'm a mother of multiple disorder son, and I worked with special needs right from the scratch. I took parents training. Then I went into masters in clinical psychology. I did cognitive behavior therapy. I did diploma in hypnosis. I'm advanced certified autism specialist from IBCCS. And I have a supporting group called Differently Able Journey in Facebook. Apart from that, I'm here with the Green Pencil Foundation, where I'm a mental health expert and clinical psychologist. So I was not prepared here as such, but the program dealer, they just gave me an opportunity to speak. And when it came to mental health, I could not stop myself. So I have been from the scratch and been as a special educator, being in this whole world, and I'm doing my best. So if there is anything which I can do for special needs, I'm available. My platform is available called Differently Able Journey, and it's in Facebook. We do webinars. I have 27 countries, professionals, and parents supporting me there.
So we have 475 members there. So anybody with special needs, any parents who are in need of it, I'm there for y'all. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We've got one last comment and then.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for organizing such a nice and great side event. And I'd like also to take this moment to thank our wonderful panelists for the message they left us with. This is Shita Sawas from African Disability Forum. And I don't have a question, just but input and a message. In bringing infrastructure change and to ensure inclusivity in infrastructure, I think we need to collaborate and bring about the desired resources in building the capacities of local organizations of persons with disabilities. When I said local, I'm thinking of the umbrella national organizations of persons with disabilities. I think it's their role to nurture partnership and bring about collaboration and to toward this lobby and advocacy with national governments. That's their role. And so, but in doing so, we need to really work toward this bringing that desired capacity for advocacy, lobby, negotiation, and partnership. I thank you.
Thank you so much for all those contributions. We won't have time to get responses from the panelists, but really thank you for adding those valuable contributions. And I think it's the point that collaboration is everything. I also think to really end, wanted to say it's incredible to see if we've been full and actually over capacity and have an event on disability, infrastructure and climate change at COP that's oversubscribed is something to celebrate. Thank you all for coming. We have the QR codes of the different resources on the screen here, so please do save them. We will share them with everyone who's registered by email as well. And with that, I will end. And please grab something to eat before you leave.